and it was a woman being fully isolated like that, we would call it abuse. And I consider their dynamic to be somewhat abusive. And their Montecito house is sort of a gilded cage for him. He went from one gilded cage that was massive in Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle to an even smaller one there in Montecito, where life is going considerably badly for the two of them. And Harry will want to break free and, maybe regain some aspects of his former life.
The real Meghan Markle has been revealed, and this time by her own perfect calligraphy, which has been analysed by experts to show that this is a woman who not only treats her husband like crap, but doesn't reveal what she is thinking, not just to the outside world, but also to herself. Now, I find this really fascinating stuff, and I want to go into it in a little bit of detail, actually, because you remember that Meghan Markle on that disastrous Middle Eastern tour left 2 notes on the wall of this community centre that had links to international terrorist organisation Hamas. And the Daily Telegraph have actually closely analysed it by one of the world's top graphologists. This is Emma Bark. And they headline this piece, "In Meghan's world, everything must look good." And they say that this is a woman hyper-focused on image. Now, there's quite a lot of interesting stuff going around about this visit, of course, and what it all means. We'll get into it with Brittany, editor of the Royal News Network, imminently. But it is just worth pointing out this from Niall Gardner, who is one of the bosses of the Heritage Foundation in the US, which is campaigning for Prince Harry to have his citizenship potentially revoked if it turns out that he did lie about his illegal drug use upon entry into the US. And he says about the note, Prince Harry knows a great deal about illegal drugs. The key question is whether he lied about his drug use on his US immigration application. If he did lie on his application, a federal offence, it would result in his deportation and or several years in an American prison. So the point that he's making is there's a lot at stake when it comes to this visit, and the fact that Harry, and this was something that was overlooked, I guess, is definitely leaning in to the whole addict approach. But okay, we'll come to that shortly. First, let's look at what Emma Buck, this graphologist, has worked out. And it is really fascinating based on these 2 notes that were written by Meghan and Harry in their very different styles and then posted on the wall in Jordan. Now, we'll start with Meghan, who the graphologist says superficially Meghan's note radiates confidence far more than Prince Harry's. But her writing is so stylized that anyone can see her number one focus is her image. The sticky note shows up close what we previously only glimpsed at from a distance in a picture she posted on Instagram of her mood board, which was also clearly constructed for public consumption. It makes me yearn to get hold of one of her shopping lists or anything that would allow me to see how Meghan writes when she isn't so preoccupied by appearance. The first thing you see is that each one of her letters is embellished with curlicues and decorative strokes that don't serve a functional purpose, but also aren't unconscious flourishes. I suspect they are deliberate additions to give her handwriting individual flair. There are also a great many self-protective strokes. Look at the way certain letters, particularly in words like happiness, wishing, and dedication, are formed, so the middle zone of the word is shielded. Graphologically, that is a classic sign of someone who protects their inner self at all costs. At all costs. Her pen pressure is strong and consistent, which points to high energy levels, passion, and commitment. This is a woman who can throw herself fully into whatever she is doing at the time, but very strong pressure can also tip into obsession. And there are indications here of a perfectionist streak. In Meghan's world, everything must look good. Her baseline, now that's the often invisible line upon which the base of letters rests, is exceptionally straight. Almost as though she's writing on lined paper even when she isn't, which suggests an obsession, there's that word again, with planning, and shows how important structure and order are to her. The way she crosses her T in words like congratulations points to her ambition. Meghan knows what she wants, and she is not someone who likes being told what to do. Her long Y strokes are carefully separated from surrounding letters, showing exceptional organisation skills and a desire not to get emotionally entangled. Even her ovals, the O shapes in words like you and yours, are tightly crossed and almost knotted. That indicates that she is a woman who finds it very difficult to reveal what she is really thinking, not just to the outside world, but sometimes even to herself. Brittany, look, this is really interesting, I think, because does someone's handwriting reveal a lot about themselves? Well, certainly. That is this woman's profession. And it's interesting to me, isn't it? It's all about control with her, but it's also all about denial, Brittany, because I think it's totally clear that Meghan Markle is in denial about who she really is. And I do believe that very often she is in denial to herself. What did you make of this analysis?
I mean, it's very fascinating, Dan. We know that Meghan is probably a somewhat obsessive person because we know she has this real obsession with things looking a particular way. But it's also funny, too, because she would, I think, claim in some ways not to be a perfectionist or to be a perfectionist, but we see her brand results and these sorts of things. So we know she's not really a perfectionist at the same time, or she has some sort of weird manifestation of what looks perfect to her. But we know when it comes to her life in general, I think she very much likes things done a particular way, in her own way as she directs. We know because of how she's treated her staff members, she's probably very obsessive and aggressive with what she wants. If they do anything that deviates a little bit, they get clap back from her. Or if things don't go her way, they get clap back, these sorts of things. But it's a really fascinating analysis. But Meghan, yes, she never reveals what she's really thinking. I'm not even sure we've ever really seen the real Meghan, to be honest. I think that's something that carefully guarded because while she is a narcissist, she's also wildly, wildly insecure about herself, which is why it always feels like she's wearing a mask. She's never her real self. She doesn't really like her real self. And that's sort of the irony of her whole post-royal existence, is that if she could be the real Meghan, even if it's probably not a likable character, I think she'd actually be much more successful than being this faux humanitarian entrepreneur when she obviously clearly does not have the skills or the intelligence to do so. She's a Kardashian level. Well, maybe that's even offensive to them, but she is just a bare bones basic influencer who likes things to have a particular flourish. But yeah, her fancy cursive is just ridiculous. I don't understand why she does it like all the time. Just write normal, Meghan. Like, that's fine. Nobody really cares that much. But having flourish in everything, can you imagine somebody who has to have a flourish every time they write a note? It would just drive you bonkers.
I find it exhausting. I've always hated the calligraphy. Actually, I've always hated it. I don't like it. Don't like it. Don't think it's cool. I really don't.
I mean, just write normally.
Yeah,
that's what
totally.
we all do.
And I've got very messy handwriting. So actually, I'm not going to criticize Harry for his, which is pretty normal. I quite like people with messy handwriting, if I'm totally honest. But the graphologist then looked into what Harry's said about him. And she said, by contrast, it's far less managed. The first thing you notice is the spacing. He leaves wide gaps between words, which is a strong indicator of someone who occasionally needs some space from other people. Meghan might claim she loves spending time alone, but the truth is that she thrives on attention. Whereas for Harry, moments of solitude are essential to his emotional well-being. Interestingly, although his words are widely spaced, the letters within them are quite tightly packed. That suggests a man who struggles to articulate how he feels, even if he experiences those feelings deeply. His baseline is uneven and undulating, which makes me think he is adaptable, emotionally responsive, and can go with the flow. A useful trait when you have a married woman when you have married a woman who, according to her handwriting, needs to order the world exactly to her liking. The downside of this is that he can waver when under pressure. Harry's pen pressure has increased compared with earlier samples, suggesting he has become more emotional since becoming a father, but there's also a downward tilt in parts of the writing. When he writes words like courage, they appear to almost be sinking in on themselves, which tells me he was tired on the day in question. And I mean, he clearly was. I mean, he looked out of sorts, Brittany, through that whole tour, as if something wasn't correct with him at all. And it's interesting to me when she suggests that he needs time on his own. And I do feel that. I think he's struggling at the moment, big time. So it was quite interesting analysis of Harry, I thought, too.
Mhm. I think that's really interesting, especially the dynamic of having Meghan, who constantly needs attention. I mean, we see her constantly clinging to him. And if you're someone who is an introvert and you need to recharge your social battery and these sorts of things by being alone, and you have this woman who's constantly trying to get attention from you, trying to get her self validation from you, that can be, I would argue, a very toxic dynamic because sometimes it's like, you just need to be alone. You just need to be away. And she just can't seem to do that. She needs to desperately cling. And we saw a guy during this tour who was, like you said, very out of sorts. In that Channel 4 interview, he looks tense. His shoulders are up really high. His eyes are shifting towards the doctor as if I don't know what to say. And I'm confused. And I think he maybe knew kind of when they got there or at some point, oh, this is not what I thought this was. I'm being pulled in here to do something. Maybe he was sharp enough to pick up on that. I'm not sure. But I don't think life is going well for him. I don't think things are going well in his relationship and these sorts of things. Meghan's constant need for control and for things to be a particular way, I'm sure, are grating. Like, you can adapt to a certain extent, but at some point you're just going to be, I just want to do things my way, not the Meghan Markle way. And I'm sure that's causing a lot of tension at home.
She said the relationship dynamic became very clear. Meghan plans while Harry adapts. She controls the image while he goes along with the narrative she is creating for their family. She needs to be center stage while he would often prefer to be left alone. In terms of parenting styles, I would imagine Harry is relaxed about the chaos that is often inevitable when you live with small children, while Meghan, who is the ultimate perfectionist, perhaps struggles with aspects of it. Well, she does. She absolutely does. And most of it is passed on, of course, to the team of nannies. Ultimately, she says this is a well-established partnership, but their writing samples make me question whether it is necessarily an equal one. And of course, Brittany, there's nothing equal about it, is there?
Meghan dominates. The house is ruled by Meghan. We actually heard this in a People magazine interview, or maybe not interview, but article. We're talking about how Meghan basically plans every aspect of their life. The house is controlled by Meghan. She makes all the decisions, and Harry just has to go along with that. And I can imagine that is quite grating, and that's sort of hard and challenging. And yes, he has adapted to that. But is he living the life that he truly wants to live? I don't think so. I think this is the life sort of that Meghan envisions for herself. I think a lot of it has gone a lot more sideways because this is a woman, again, who thought she was going to be a billionaire when they moved to California. She thought she was going to make buckets of money and all of her Hollywood dreams would come true. And it really hasn't happened for her. And so you have to look at this dynamic and see the failure is getting to them. The opposite nature of them is getting to them. I wasn't sure if they would make it past 5 years because if you look at the two of them, what do they truly have in common? Really nothing, except for now their children and being in this relationship. Harry had to give up basically every aspect of himself to please her. He is basically an extension of her. And he might be willing to live like that for a while, but at some point I would imagine Harry will want to break free and, maybe regain some aspects of his former life. And that's probably what he'll do.
Brittany, I couldn't agree more. The relationship is in deep trouble. I mean, I have been reporting on that for some time. I think the problem is that Harry can't even hide it anymore. Like, in public appearances, when he is with her, his entire demeanor is totally contrasted to what he's like when he's on his own. When you do see a little glimpse of what people would describe as the old Harry, you know, the fun-loving Harry. I always think that was a bit of a media creation, but I do understand there is such a difference there. Now, I actually always gave the marriage 10 years, and I still do, because the problem is he has isolated himself so much to the point where, Brittany, it's very difficult for him to even countenance leaving his children. And of course, that was one of the main things that people in his family and close friends were so desperately concerned about when he did decide to exit. Like, what are you doing? She's going to take your children. You're never going to be able to get the children back to the United Kingdom. So in some ways, this misery is baked in. And unfortunately for him, given the age of the children, he's locked in.
He is. And Dan, this was something obviously that when Harry gave up control in the relationship. Now, people can argue, but there's usually a dynamic between men and women where the men lead and generally the women follow. When Harry gave up that sort of, I would argue, more natural dynamic in those type of couples, he gave up so much of himself. And the whole reality with royalty is that usually you marry into the family and you either stay and have children and live there, or you go back home. I mean, even if they divorce, for example, Peter Phillips and Autumn, she has stayed in the UK, even though she is from Canada. And so when they came over from Exit, I mean, and Harry got so isolated from his family that the natural, I think, breakdown in their relationship because of their lack of things in common was now extended because he's stuck. What can he do? He's stuck there with the kids, regardless of what happens in their relationship. Now, for the rest of his life, he's going to be having to live somewhere in Los Angeles. And he doesn't really have a natural out anymore. And to be honest, I would argue in their relationship, if that was, let's say the sexes were reversed, and it was a woman being fully isolated like that, we would call it abuse. And I consider their dynamic to be somewhat abusive in that way, because I don't think Harry leaving his family was natural. I think she sort of forced the issue. He thought it was his idea, but it's really not. I think he resents her in some ways. I think he misses his family quite a bit, still confused as to how everything went wrong. But I think he does genuinely miss them. But now he's in this, basically, I mean, their Montecito house is sort of a gilded cage for him. He went from one gilded cage that was massive in Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle to an even smaller one there in Montecito, where life is going considerably badly for the two of them. And I think financial pressures will probably be the big thing that really hurts the relationship, because that's coming.
Oh, indeed it is. Indeed it is. That is absolutely coming. And you're completely right. She did convince him that this was all his idea and what he wanted to do. But the problem is his whole decision to leave was based on her tissue of lies. Like, she had managed to convince him completely based on nothing that his whole family was racist and was engaged in some type of racist plot against her. It was just nonsense. And of course, it took him getting out of that circle to actually realize, oh God, I have been misled here. At this point, he was all in, no, my family is racist and my wife has told me my family is racist and I'm convinced that she's right. Now, look, the Royal Grift has done something very interesting, Brittany. And sometimes I, again, think we don't zoom out enough on a macro level and just think about how much hasn't worked for this couple, like really has on a macro level, and just think about how much hasn't worked for this couple, like really hasn't worked. And the Royal Grift headlined this, Meghan Markle's sucky ideas that bombed. And I mean, so many of them you will have even forgotten about, right? Like, let's just look through this. You've got Disney Elephants, the Archetypes podcast, American Riviera Orchard that never was, The Bench, the children's book that flopped, the 40 by 40 initiative. Remember, lots of celebrities are part of that, but then no follow-up for it whatsoever. Pearl, the ripped off children's series that was never made. Meet Me at the Lake, still never been made. Live to Lead, total disastrous flop in the ratings, criticised by Jacinda Ardern. Heart of Invictus, total flop in the ratings. Polo, total flop in the ratings, not renewed. With Love Meghan, we know how bad that was. Confessions of a Female Founder, huge launch behind it, and then tanked and was out of the top 100 before you knew it. The Archewell Foundation, I mean, that's the most shocking. Cookie Queens, of course, that is an ongoing project, but despite the Sundance appearance, no pickup so far, and then Was Never. And you just look at the main points that she has made in that document, and she says multiple failed business venture, declining public interest, brand tarnished post 2020, strained royal relations. And Brittany, I think for me, it was just seeing. I know we speak about them on a day-to-day basis. You know, we've covered, and you have covered on the Royal News Network, every single one of those disasters individually. But when you see a list of it and you think in such a short period of time, there has been that many disasters. And don't get me wrong, like, entrepreneurs fail sometimes, and usually they put everything into one business and maybe it fails and you need to have a couple of those and then you start again. But she fails so quickly, but moves on so quickly. She never actually tries to turn this around.
She doesn't, Dan. And I think most critically, Meghan has not learned from any of her failures, because a failure is a teaching moment. Like, what went wrong? How can we do a sort of deep dive into, let's say, wrong decisions, or we're choosing the wrong distributor, or these sorts of things. She never learns. And so what she does, and why we've seen, I think, such a series of failures, is she does the same mistake all the time. She's constantly regurgitating the same tired narratives about basically women being oppressed, and she's a feminist and she needs to fight for women and all these sorts of things. And it's like, that's not a narrative that appeals to that many people really anymore. And so her whole, I think, overly woman-focused initiative hasn't worked out well for her. Nothing really has worked. And if she could, I think, hire the right people, this is a thing, especially with As Ever, which I think is going to be probably the biggest catastrophic failure of Meghan's whole sort of entrepreneurial journey, of course, and journey in Hollywood, is that if she had hired the correct people to actually run the business, and she had stepped to the side and just was like, well, I'll just sort of be the face of it, I'll have some creative input, these sorts of things, but I'll let the actual professionals run it, she might be sitting on a landmine. But she didn't. Meghan's constant, I think, biggest mistake is that she always thinks she's right, and she's not. She does not have good instincts. She is not a creative, I don't think. And so she constantly regurgitates what other people do, because she has no ability to think for herself, to come up with something new and interesting. And she never learns and takes evaluation of the failures. What lessons could she take to make things better? And so we just see the same slop all the time, and people are just completely and utterly over it. And she is seeing the results now. And if she doesn't, let's say, change something up, I mean, I think As Ever will be a catastrophic flop with massive loads of inventory that she can't offload, and maybe that she's invested millions upon millions of dollars of their money into, and that she can never get back.
Yeah, look, it's funny, because actually what you were saying, Brittany, if Meghan Markle wasn't Meghan Markle, the Meghan Markle business could have succeeded. And actually, I do agree. I do agree. It could have.
100%.
But the problem is she is Meghan Markle, so it won't work. But no, it's very, very interesting what you say. I completely agree. Brittany, look, we've got to talk about this attempt by a whole load of people. I think it's been driven by Buckingham Palace to destroy the legacy of Queen Elizabeth II. I'm sick of it. Actually, I'm not having it. I want to do a deep dive on this.